The stars had become my only constant. Out here, where Earth was nothing more than a bright memory behind me, I measured time not in days, but in the shifting hues of nebulae and the pulse of reactor cores. My assignment was supposed to be uneventful. Survey a mineral-rich moon at the edge of map space, file the reports, and return home with the data. I had grown used to solitude, to the hum of instruments answering me more faithfully than any voice. What I had not grown used to was silence breaking itself. It started as a vibration through the hull, too deep to be local turbulence. Alarms triggered, sharp red flares washing over the cockpit. My sensors scrambled to process the distortion ahead. At first, I thought the void itself had cracked, light twisted into impossible geometries, as though space were folding inward on itself. Then the shape emerged. The vessel dwarfed mine by orders of magnitude, sleek and sculpted, more like something grown than built. It glided without thrust or flame, as though inertia and mass were optional concepts. Symbols etched along its hull shifted and rearranged, alive like ink and water. Every instinct told me to run, but there was no running. The ship had not come by chance. It had arrived precisely here, precisely now. A channel opened across my systems, without authorization. My comm lights bloomed green. They weren't asking, they were entering. The voice was layered, melodic yet firm, translating itself through my software. Remain where you are. You will be met. I should have armed the defense turrets, should have called command, but the words pinned me. Remain. You will be met. There was no threat in the tone, yet no room for refusal. My hands hovered over the console, useless. Their craft extended a smaller pod, which detached and glided toward my docking bay with terrifying precision. I swallowed against the sudden dryness in my throat. History had prepared me for this moment in abstract lectures, but the reality of it, the knowledge that I was about to see a being from beyond our world, stirred something primal, a blend of fear and exhilaration that made my pulse rattle. The docking clamps sealed. A hiss of pressure equalized the chambers. I stood at the airlock, heart battering my ribs. The door slid open, and for a breath I thought statues had walked into my ship. Figures tall and imposing stepped through, armored in plates that shimmered like liquid metal. Helmets concealed their faces, lenses glowing faintly, movements sharp and synchronized. Soldiers. Guards. They did not reach for weapons, but their very stillness was a warning. One wrong gesture, and I would not leave this encounter alive. And then she appeared. Smaller than the guards, though still taller than me. Her frame carried a poise that drew the eye. Her armor was different, less brutal, more ceremonial, engraved with lines that shifted like constellations. She moved forward as though the corridor belonged to her, as though every breath of air in my ship awaited her permission. When she stopped before me, I realized I was holding mine. Her helmet tilted, the faint reflection of my own anxious face mirrored on its curved surface. The moment stretched, taut and trembling. Then, with a deliberate slowness, her hands rose to the locks at her collar. The plates hissed, mechanisms releasing. Piece by piece, the helmet separated until she lifted it free. The first thing I saw were her eyes, vast, luminous, irises layered in shades no human painter could trap. They studied me with unshielded intensity, and I felt as if the sum of my life was being weighed in silence. Her features were unmistakably alien. Cheekbones too high, skin suffused with a subtle sheen, hair that moved like strands of molten silver, but they aligned in a way that struck something universal within me. My voice escaped without my consent, raw and honest. Gorgeous. The word hung between us, absurd in its simplicity, a fragile bridge cast across species and histories. Her expression shifted. Curiosity first, then something sharper, almost amused. The corners of her lips curved in what might have been a smile, though her eyes remained assessing, predatory. She stepped closer. The guards behind her stiffened, but did not intervene. "You speak plainly," she said, the translator catching her voice and wrapping it into human cadence. "Is this how your kind greets the unknown?" I flushed, heat rising despite the chill in the air. "It's not protocol." My throat caught. It was honest. For a heartbeat, I feared the slip had condemned me, that she would mark me as disrespectful, unworthy, and give a nod that ended me. Instead, she leaned nearer, close enough that the faint scent of something metallic and floral filled the space between us. Honesty, she murmured, as if tasting the word. Few dare it in first meetings. Her gaze pierced mine, and I felt the weight of command radiating from her, not merely authority, but destiny itself, as though every choice she made reshaped the balance of worlds. My body screamed to retreat, yet something deeper held me still. Behind her, the guards shifted formation, silent reminders of the fragile line I balanced upon. But it was no longer the soldiers that commanded my focus. It was her, this princess, if the subtle reverence of their stances was any clue. She had stepped unarmored into a foreign vessel, revealed her face before a stranger, and acknowledged words that might have been folly. I realized then that my future, perhaps humanity's future, was tangled with hers in ways I could not yet fathom. And as her eyes lingered on me, neither dismissive nor hostile, I understood that the story had only just begun. Her presence transformed the narrow corridor of my ship into something ceremonial. The guards had arranged themselves with disciplined precision, their silence as heavy as their armor. But it was the princess who held the air in her grasp. I stood caught between awe and unease, conscious of how small my vessel seemed under her scrutiny. She tilted her head, her silver hair shifting with the movement, and spoke again through the translator embedded in my systems. "You are less fragile than expected," she said, the words rolling like an evaluation rather than a compliment. I forced myself to stand straighter. "Fragile or not, I'm the only one here. You'll have to settle for me." One of her guards bristled at my tone, their gauntlet flexing as if ready to silence me. The princess raised a hand, stopping them with the smallest gesture. Her eyes returned to me, weighing, measuring. "You speak as though your presence is chosen. Yet fate arranged this encounter." The remark pricked at me. Maybe. But fate didn't send me to my knees. Something flickered across her face. Amusement, perhaps. She stepped further into the cabin, her gaze sweeping over the consoles, the instruments, the cramped human design. "Your vessel is crude, inefficient, yet you dare traverse the void." Her hand brushed the edge of a panel, elegant fingers lingering. Why? The question cut deeper than I expected. Because we have to. Survival demands it. Curiosity drives it. We're not satisfied with the horizon we're given. Her eyes narrowed slightly, reflective as still water. That hunger has destroyed many who reach too far. Maybe, I admitted, but it also defines us. For a long moment she was silent, and in that silence I felt the balance of the encounter tilt. She was not here simply to intimidate or observe. She was searching, probing for something beneath my words. At last she spoke, softer. "Your honesty is unguarded. Among my people, such directness is rare. Beauty, strength, even truth, these are masked until necessity strips them bare." Her phrasing reminded me of my slip, the single word I'd whispered when she revealed her face. Heat threatened to rise again, but I steadied myself. Maybe that's why you noticed it. Honesty isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only thing strong enough to bridge a gap this wide. The princess regarded me, unblinking. Then she turned, addressing her guards in their own language, tones layered like chords, unintelligible to me. One of them replied in clipped rhythm. She nodded, and their stances relaxed fractionally. When her gaze returned, it carried the cool weight of command. "You will accompany me to my vessel. The council must judge whether your people are suitable." I stiffened. Council? Suitable for what? For alliance. For exchange. For survival, perhaps. Her words lingered with deliberate ambiguity. Leaving my ship to enter theirs felt like surrender, yet the alternative was worse. If this council already doubted humanity's worth, refusing would be its own verdict. I exhaled, masking reluctance with resolve. "Then lead the way." The transition between my cramped corridors and their shuttle was like stepping from stone to living glass. Surfaces pulsed with faint light, shifting patterns that seemed less engineered than grown. The air carried a faint charge, like the edge of a storm, but it was clean, almost sweet. I seated myself where indicated, flanked by silent guards whose presence made any thought of escape laughable. The princess sat opposite me, unhelmeted, her face uncovered as though daring me to stare. I did, for moments too long, then forced myself to meet her eyes instead of tracing the impossible symmetry of her features. "You risked much, revealing yourself," I said, breaking the silence. "Why? Wouldn't it have been easier to leave the helmet on, keep the mystery?" Her gaze sharpened. "Because mystery invites fear, and fear births violence. I showed you what I am to test what you would do with truth. And what did you see? A word. Simple, instinctive. Not calculation. That alone distinguishes you." Her lips curved slightly, though not quite into a smile. "Whether it redeems or condemns you remains to be seen." The shuttle docked with a larger vessel, its scale even more overwhelming up close. Docking arms enfolded us like branches, and the walls themselves seemed to pulse with a heartbeat. As we disembarked, alien attendants bowed in synchronized motion, their eyes lowered not to me, but to her. Princess, that unspoken truth solidified with every gesture they made in her presence. She led me through corridors vast enough to swallow my entire ship, every surface alive with shifting script. I felt like a child wandering a cathedral carved from light. The guards maintained their silent watch, but it was her nearness that pressed most heavily upon me. Finally, she guided me into a chamber that radiated authority. A semicircle of robed figures sat elevated on a dais, their faces obscured by veils of woven crystal. They turned as one, and though no eyes were visible, the weight of their collective judgment pressed on me with suffocating force. The princess stepped forward. Her voice, though calm, carried through the chamber like a commandment. She spoke in her own tongue, the translator whispering its interpretation into my ear. "This is the human. He stands as their representative, though he did not expect the role. I bring him here unveiled, so that truth may be measured." The robed figures murmured, their voices a layered chorus. One asked through the translation, "Why this one? A lone wanderer cannot embody an entire species." Her response came swift. "He speaks plainly. His words are untempered by fear or strategy. That makes him a window into what they are." The implication struck me. She had staked her reputation, perhaps even her authority, on my behavior. And I, untrained in diplomacy, unprepared for councils of alien rulers, was expected to carry the weight of humanity's worth. I stepped forward, my mouth dry, but before I could speak, the princess's gaze fixed on me. There was no warmth there, no amusement now, only a silent command. "Be worthy." The chamber's light dimmed, focusing on me alone. The council waited. My heartbeat thundered. This was no longer an encounter. It was a judgment. And though I did not yet know the criteria, I knew the outcome would shape far more than my fate. The chamber's silence pressed on me like a crushing weight. Dozens of unseen eyes, hidden behind crystalline veils, seemed to pierce through every layer of composure I tried to maintain. The council did not move, but the very stillness of their bodies carried menace. They were rulers accustomed to shaping destinies with a single decree. The princess remained just off to my side, her presence steady, her gaze fixed on me as though daring me to falter. I opened my mouth, ready to speak, when the chamber trembled. A vibration ran through the floor, subtle at first, then escalating into a violent shudder that rattled the crystalline walls. The veiled figures stiffened, their harmony fractured as alarm spread among them. Somewhere beyond the chamber, an explosion rippled through the air like a struck drum. The princess turned sharply, her voice cutting through the confusion with commanding clarity. She spoke in her language, and though the words slipped past me, their intent was unmistakable. Action, not deliberation. Guards moved instantly, forming a protective barrier around her. A second blast rocked the vessel, this one closer. The air filled with a bitter tang of scorched metal. My instincts screamed at me to move, to survive, but I was pinned by the knowledge that I was no longer merely a bystander. Whoever struck at them had done, so while humanity's worth was under judgment, my presence here was already precarious. This attack could seal my people's fate. The chamber doors burst open, attendants rushing in with frantic urgency. Their words were sharp, clipped, delivered to the council in cascading reports. The translator caught fragments: ambush, hostiles, internal breach. The veiled figures shifted in agitation, their composure cracking. The princess strode toward the doors, refusing the council's frantic calls to remain. Her guards closed in, but her hand shot up, halting them. Her voice cut like steel. "With me." She turned, her gaze locking on me. "You too." I hesitated only a moment. Whatever this conflict was, retreating to safety was not an option. Not if I wanted humanity seen as more than a burden. I followed her into the corridor, my pulse hammering with every step. The halls that had once inspired awe now bristled with menace. Shards of light flickered from ruptured panels, shadows twisting across alien architecture. Somewhere deeper within, the clash of weapons echoed, alien against alien, their struggle reverberating like storm surf against stone. One of her guards spoke rapidly, his tone urgent. She answered with fire, her pace quickening. I caught fragments from the translator, insurgents, traitors targeting the council. It struck me then, this wasn't an external invasion. It was a fracture within her own people. And if she fell here, humanity's fledgling chance at recognition would be extinguished with her. We turned a corner, and the threat revealed itself. Armored figures, similar to her guards, but marked with jagged emblems, advanced in formation. Their weapons glowed with searing energy. At the sight of the princess, they unleashed a volley that scorched the air. Her guards surged forward to intercept, energy blades crackling as they met the assault. The corridor exploded with light and sound. I dove against the wall, the heat from a passing bolt searing my sleeve. My instincts told me to cower, but the princess did not hesitate. She drew a weapon from her hip, sleek, organic, more like a living shard than a crafted tool, and fired with precision that carved through enemy armor. One of the traitors broke from the group, charging straight for her. Without thinking, I moved. My body acted before my mind could measure the futility of it. I hurled myself at the attacker, colliding with the armored figure just as his weapon leveled at her chest. The impact rattled me to the bone, his armor unyielding, but the strike deflected his aim long enough for one of her guards to cut him down. The princess's eyes snapped to me, wide for the first time since I'd met her. Surprise, perhaps even alarm, flickered there. Then the moment passed, replaced by a sharp nod before she turned back to the fight. More explosions thundered through the vessel. The walls themselves shivered, patterns of light scattering like frightened birds. The guards pushed forward, forcing the traitors back, but the battle was far from over. We pressed deeper into the vessel, each corridor a gauntlet of fire and steel. At one point, a blast tore open a section of the wall, exposing a jagged wound into the void. The pull of vacuum threatened to drag us all into oblivion. Instinct again seized me. I lunged for a loose panel, slamming it into the breach, bracing it with my weight until the emergency sealants hardened. My lungs screamed from the effort, but the corridor stabilized. When I staggered back, breath ragged, the princess was watching me again. This time, there was no surprise in her gaze, only something quieter, recognition. We reached a secure chamber, where the remaining guards regrouped. Reports flew in rapid bursts. The translator spat fragments. Council scattered multiple casualties, central core at risk. Her jaw tightened. She turned to me, stepping closer until her luminous eyes held me fast. "Do you see now? Strength alone cannot shield us. We fracture from within, and still you throw yourself into danger not meant for you." Why? I wiped soot from my face, breath still uneven. Because survival isn't a calculation. You fight for the person next to you, not just for yourself. That's what keeps us alive. For the first time, her composure cracked, not with fear, but with something like wonder. Her lips parted, the faintest trace of breath escaping before she turned away, concealing it behind command once more. Another explosion roared, closer still. She drew her weapon, raising her voice. "Then fight with us, human. Prove your words in fire." And though terror coiled in my gut, I knew I would follow. For her, for humanity, for the fragile chance that honesty and courage might mean more than calculation. The chamber doors opened again, light spilling in from burning corridors. The enemy surged forward, and together we met them head-on. The battle had left the vessel trembling, its vast corridors littered with shattered armor and scorched fragments of once pristine walls. Smoke coiled through the air, thin and acrid, while the steady hum of the ship's living systems flickered and faltered as though the entire structure had been wounded. My chest burned with exhaustion, every breath sharp and ragged, but adrenaline still drove me forward. At my side, the princess strode unyielding, her blade-like weapon dimming as the last of the traitors collapsed at her feet. Silence followed, fractured only by the distant hiss of sealing bulkheads. Her guards regrouped, fewer now than before, their armor scarred but their posture unbroken. They looked to her not simply as a leader, but as the axis upon which their survival now spun. She stood taller beneath their gaze, though I noticed the faint tremor in her hand before she steadied it against her weapon. The council chamber lay in ruins when we returned. Crystalline veils shattered across the floor, the elevated dais fractured into jagged shards. Several counselors remained, their robes scorched, their voices sharp with outrage. They did not bow to her entrance. Instead, they turned their veiled faces toward her, and through the translator I heard accusation woven in their words. "You endangered us. You brought instability into the heart of our governance. And you brought him." Their focus shifted to me, their judgment heavy, their tones sharpened with disdain. I braced myself, ready for condemnation, for the moment when my presence would be declared the catalyst for all that had transpired. But before they could press further, the princess cut through their voices with a command that silenced the chamber. "This human," she said, her tone carrying both steel and fire, "did not cower when your world shook. He threw himself into the path of danger for one he had no reason to protect. Tell me, which among you risked such a thing?" The chamber quivered with the audacity of her defense. The counselors recoiled, their veils tilting, their silence stretched taut. At last, one spoke, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Recklessness is not strength. Impulse is not wisdom. What you praise as courage may be no more than ignorance of consequence." Her gaze flicked to me, then, not in doubt, but in something firmer. "Trust. Perhaps. Or perhaps it is what we have forgotten in our pursuit of perfection. He acts not from calculation, but from conviction. And conviction," she said, her eyes sweeping across the chamber, "is what shields a people when reason falters." I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but I held back. This was her arena, her battle. To interrupt would weaken what she was staking on me. The counselors conferred among themselves in low, discordant murmurs. The translator stumbled, unable to parse the layered dialogue. Finally, the chorus broke into clarity. "We will not condemn humanity, nor will we welcome them without caution. The risk remains. The responsibility falls upon you, princess. Should they fail, their failure will be yours." The weight of their decree settled like a blade's edge between us. She inclined her head, the gesture dignified yet unyielding. "So be it." The council dispersed, leaving the chamber fractured but alive. When the last veil had vanished beyond the doors, I turned to her. The adrenaline had finally begun to ebb, leaving behind the heaviness of exhaustion and the gnawing edge of disbelief. "You defended me," I said, my voice low. "You defended all of us." She regarded me, her expression unreadable at first. Then she stepped closer, close enough that the smoke in the air seemed to curl around her like a cloak. I defended what I saw, a spark I thought extinguished among my own people. Her eyes lingered on me, luminous, searching. "When you first spoke to me, you named beauty. Now, after fire and blood, I see you name more than appearances. You embody what you claim, a will that refuses to yield." I let the words settle, unsure how to answer. Part of me wanted to retreat behind humility, to insist that I had acted on instinct alone. Yet another part, the deeper part, knew what she was asking. Not for denial, for acknowledgement. We fight because we must, I said quietly. But we also fight because something in us believes the struggle matters. Even when the odds are impossible. Her lips parted, a breath escaping as though she were tasting the words. Then, in a voice softer than I had yet heard from her, she said, "Perhaps that is why you are dangerous, and why you may yet be necessary." The surviving guards approached, their leader bowing before her, speaking in clipped tones. The translator whispered, "The ship is stable. The insurgents are routed, but fractures remain. The Empire will demand explanation." She nodded, dismissing them with a wave. When they had gone, she turned back to me, and for the first time, her composure softened. "The Council will keep their word. They will not erase your people. But their acceptance is conditional. They will watch. They will test. And should you falter, I will share in your fate." I absorbed the weight of it. This was more than alliance. It was a tether binding us together, fragile yet undeniable. "Then I hope," I said, my throat tight, "you don't regret tying yourself to us." Her eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. "Regret is for those who fear the unknown. I have already walked into it." For a moment, the ruin of the chamber fell away, the smoke and shattered crystal forgotten. It was just the two of us, standing on the precipice of something vast and uncertain. At last, she stepped back, the distance reasserting her station, her duty. "You will return to your world soon. Carry with you what has passed here, and let your people know they are not alone in the dark. But remember, survival is not enough. You must prove that the fire within you can light more than your own path." I nodded, unable to find words that could match the gravity of hers. As the guards guided me back toward the shuttle, I looked over my shoulder one last time. She stood amidst the wreckage, unbowed, luminous, her gaze still fixed on me. The hatch sealed, the engines hummed, and my ship began its journey back toward the familiar stars. Yet nothing about them would ever look the same again. Humanity had been seen, judged, and, for now, spared. And in that fragile reprieve, in the memory of her eyes meeting mine across fire and ruin, I felt the echo of something more enduring than survival. Hope. The journey back through the void should have been a return to calm, but silence no longer felt like solitude. It felt like absence. My vessel, once a sanctuary of steady hums and predictable rhythms, now seemed smaller, emptier, as though her presence had expanded the very air and left behind a void that the ship's systems could not fill. I replayed every moment, the battle, her defense before the council, the weight of her gaze when she told me my fate and hers were bound. Those words clung tighter than gravity. Earth was still weeks away, but communication had already reached command. They hailed me incessantly, demanding reports, clarifications, explanations. I gave them fragments, enough to satisfy their hunger for data without betraying what could not yet be translated into words. How could I describe her? Not just the symmetry of her features or the brilliance of her weapon, but the raw conviction that had radiated from her in the midst of fire and ruin. To reduce her to facts would be to betray her essence, and so I held back. Each night, when the stars outside seemed to whisper against the hull, I found myself wondering what she was doing in that same moment. Was she facing her fractured council, enduring their suspicion? Was she rebuilding the trust of a people who had turned weapons against their own? Or had she, even for an instant, thought of the human who had spoken too quickly, too honestly, and called her beautiful? When Earth finally appeared, a pale coin against the dark, I expected relief. Instead, a strange reluctance gnawed at me. I had returned with proof that we were not alone, that humanity's place in the galaxy had shifted forever. Yet what filled me was not triumph, but a hollow awareness that the bond forged out there, fragile, dangerous, undeniable, was now an ocean away. The debriefings began immediately. A parade of officers, scientists, and officials sifted through my account, their questions sharp and endless. They wanted technical details, the composition of their vessel, the weapons used, the structure of their council. They wanted political assessments. Were these beings conquerors, allies, manipulators? Every time I hesitated, every time my answers drifted toward the human core of the story, they pressed harder. "You risked your life for her," one of the senior commanders said flatly. "Explain that decision." I met his eyes, unflinching. "Because she was worth saving, and because without her we had no chance at all." Murmurs spread through the room. Some saw recklessness. Others saw something dangerous, attachment. I gave them no further explanation. They would not understand. Not yet. In the weeks that followed, Earth's governments split along familiar lines. Some feared annihilation, preaching that contact was a mistake, that humanity should retreat, hide, fortify. Others salivated at opportunity, imagining alliances, trade, technology. I stood at the center of it all, not by choice, but by inevitability. I had become the first human voice they had heard, the first face they had seen. My testimony mattered more than I ever intended. But beneath all the noise, all the arguments, there remained a quieter truth I could not shake. I wanted to see her again. Not for politics, not for strategy, but for the raw, unvarnished connection that had sparked in the heat of fire. It haunted me in the silence between transmissions, in the reflection of my own tired eyes against the viewport. One night, while the debates raged planetside, my console flickered with a signal not routed through Earth's channels. The pattern was unmistakable, organic, shifting symbols like the ones etched into a ship. My pulse quickened as I decoded it. The message was brief, no more than a dozen words translated by my systems, but it struck with the force of revelation. Asterisk, you spoke truth. That spark endures. The council watches, but so do I. Asterisk. I read it again and again, each time slower, as though savoring the weight of every syllable. She had reached out, despite the risks, despite the scrutiny of her people. Whatever thread had bound us had not frayed. The next day, when command demanded another round of explanations, I spoke differently. I told them what they did not want to hear, that strength alone would not save us, that survival was not enough. I told them about conviction, about the fire that had carried us through the breach, about the bond that had forced her to defend me before her council. Some dismissed it as sentiment. Others called it naive. But a few listened, really listened, their eyes shifting with a glimmer of something new. Weeks turned into months, and humanity braced itself for whatever came next. Their ships had not returned, nor had their council sent formal envoys. But her message remained etched into my systems, a constant reminder that this was not an ending, but a threshold. I walked one evening along the observation ring of the orbital station, Earth turning slow and blue beneath me. 1,000 lights blinked across the surface. Lives lived in ignorance of how close they had come to being erased. I pressed a hand to the glass, remembering the heat of her gaze, the steady conviction in her voice. For the first time since leaving her vessel, I allowed myself to whisper aloud, unguarded, "Gorgeous." The word carried no shame now, no fear. It was not just about her face, her form, or her otherworldly radiance. It was about the fire she had rekindled in me, the proof that even across impossible distances and unbridgeable divides, something as simple as honesty could alter the fate of worlds. And though I stood alone in that moment, staring out into a darkness thick with stars, I knew she was out there too, watching, waiting. The story between us had not ended in the ruins of her council chamber. It had only begun, and the galaxy itself had become the stage for what came next. The signal came at dawn, when the orbital station still floated in its half-sleep hush, and the Earth below glowed with a slow bloom of sunrise. I was not meant to be awake, yet rest had grown elusive. Her message, brief as it had been, continued to stir through my thoughts like embers refusing to cool. When the console pulsed alive with that familiar organic pattern of shifting light, my breath caught before the translation even formed. Asterisk, the council grows restless. Voices call for severance. I cannot hold them long. Come, or all is lost. Asterisk. The words scalded away hesitation. There was no mention of place, no coordinates embedded. Yet the message itself carried a resonance my systems recognized. A corridor of light unfurled in the void, faint but traceable, like a secret path carved just for me. I knew then that she had bent some law of her people to reach me. If I ignored it, the path would collapse. If I followed, I might never return. Command would never sanction the journey. Their fear had only deepened since her first contact. They wanted treaties written on their terms, technology stripped, threats neutralized. They had no patience for ambiguity, no tolerance for the fragile trust she and I had built in fire. If I brought this to them, they would cage it in bureaucracy until it suffocated. So I told no one. Within the hour, my ship slipped free of the station, its departure cloaked beneath routine traffic. I charted myself into the corridor of light, and the stars bent around me as though reality itself had consented to her call. The sensation was disorienting, an acceleration without motion, a stretch without distance. But at its end, her vessel loomed again, majestic and scarred, the fractures of our last battle still visible like half-healed wounds. Docking was seamless, as though my ship had always belonged there. The airlock opened, and she was waiting. No guards, no attendants, no ceremonial armor. Just her, clad in simple fabric that flowed like woven starlight, her luminous eyes unshielded. The sight of her stopped me where I stood. "You came," she said, and the translator rendered her tone softer than I remembered, almost fragile. "You asked," I answered, my throat dry, "and you said it mattered." A flicker of relief crossed her features before duty overtook it. She turned, beckoning me to follow. "There is little time. The council fractures. Some claim humanity is the infection that emboldened the traitors. Others argue your courage proved we need your kind. They cannot agree, and in their division, the empire weakens." I kept pace beside her through corridors less pristine than before. The organic walls still pulsed with light, but veins of darkness streaked through them like bruises. The ship itself seemed to echo her words, a living metaphor of division. "What do they want of me?" I asked. "They want you gone, or they want you bound. Some demand you prove humanity's worth through endless trials. Others say no trial can measure it. They circle, they stall, and in their delay, the empire risks collapse." We entered a chamber smaller than the council hall, intimate and bare. No veils, no dais, only a table grown from the very floor. She gestured for me to sit. "I asked you here because I cannot fight them alone. Not anymore. If I stand for you, I must know you stand for me." Her words struck deeper than any council decree. She was not asking for humanity's alliance. She was asking for mine. I leaned forward, hands braced on the living surface. "I stood for you when fire threatened to take you. I'll stand again. But you need to tell me what this fight will cost." For the first time, she looked away. "If I bind myself to you, I sever part of myself from them. My claim to the throne weakens. My people may brand me traitor." And yet, her gaze returned, steady and luminous. "Without a bridge, both our worlds drift into ruin. You are the bridge." The weight of it pressed on me, heavier than any duty I had carried before. I was no ambassador, no diplomat forged in the halls of power. I was a lone wanderer who had spoken too quickly, too honestly, and now bore the consequence. Yet perhaps that was why she trusted me. Before I could answer, alarms rippled through the ship, low and resonant. She stiffened, one hand lifting as though to draw a weapon that was not there. The walls pulsed red, shadows leaping in violent rhythm. "They come again," she whispered. "Council loyalists?" I asked. Her jaw clenched. "Or worse. If they tear us apart now, there will be no bridge to save." The doors hissed open, her guards flooding in, armor scorched and voices urgent. The translator caught only fragments. Ships approaching, demands issued, prepare for breach. She turned to me, her composure breaking only enough to reveal the strain beneath. "This is the moment. They will not let you walk away unchanged. Either you stand with me openly, or we both fall." The ship shuddered as impacts rumbled through its frame. The table between us fractured, shards of living light splintering across the floor. I rose, heart pounding, the decision already clear. "Then I stand with you," I said. Not because the Council demands it, not because Earth expects it, but because I believe in what you are fighting for. You said I was a spark. If that's true, then let it burn." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then her expression shifted. Relief, yes, but also resolve sharpened into something unbreakable. She reached for my hand, her touch warm, electric. "Then, together, we will endure. Let them come." The chamber lights flared, the alarms deepened, and beyond the walls, the sound of war encroached once more. Yet between us, bound now not by chance but by choice, a different kind of fire ignited. One that no council, no traitor, no empire could extinguish. And as the ship braced for its next trial, I knew the story was no longer hers, no longer mine. It was ours. And it had only just begun.